forget to renew your passport, which she did this week, right? Don't forget to get your flu shot, which I didn't do, right? and don't forget to call your brother. And then she'll start over. Hey, do you remember your passport? And I'm like, And so she'll go around in circles, and it's really a conversation of nagging, right? But I know that's how my mom shows she cares. But that's essentially what most of our students, that's the extent of their relationship with their parents. So what happens? Their friends become their surrogate family, and relationships become paramount. Let me say something very briefly right here. I've got to choose my words carefully. Okay, don't get me wrong. I think preaching is utterly important. Okay, and actually we talked about this in sermon group, that if you're not preaching the gospel, it doesn't matter how much you love these students. There's no truth. But with that said, what's going to really impact your kids is not that you preach good sermons, even though you should do that. But it's when they literally give you their SHIT in buckets, right? They're just smearing it all over your face, right? And yet you continue to pursue them, right? Where boys say, I don't understand, right? I'm so hard, but he comes after me. Why? Or girls, right? You're not so hard. You're a little bit more catty, evil, right? She's so catty. She's so mean. She knows that I'm that way, but yet she continues to pursue me. Why? That's what's going to impact them the most, that relationship, that picture of the gospel. So that's the condition. Now, what does this look like when the rubber hits the road, when it surfaces? The performance-driven mentality surfaces as legalism. And again here, as we mentioned last time, this is not just talking about do this, don't do this. This is the natural inclination of the heart. Luther's insight, right? We talked about last time. The default mode, even for Christians, unless you're intentionally shifting into gospel gear, is always legalism. And I would say, because our culture is the way that it is, it's more so with Korean American kids. Think about it. When things go wrong, right, kids will say one of two things. Either it's because I did this. I missed my quiet time. That's why the bird pooped on my head. or they'll say, God, after all I've done for you, how could you do this to me? Right? This is all anti-gospel, performance-based legalism. What about when they're not performing? They think, what? God hates me. Self-loathing. When they are performing, when they're doing well, God owes me. Extremely self-righteous. This is all anti-gospel, performance legalism. What about their attitude towards spiritual disciplines, right? If I do my QTs, if I pray, in fact, the louder I pray, the longer I pray, right, the more God will bless me. If I sweat, right, God will bless me. That's all anti-gospel, right, performance-based legalism. What about attitudes towards Christian growth? When I ask kids for prayer requests, the one that I get probably 87% of the time, I don't know where I got that number, right? But 87% of the time, they always will say, my prayer request is that I want to be a better Christian. Right? I want God to help me be a better Christian. And what they're really saying behind that is I want God to help me perform better so I can be more acceptable. Right? Anti-gospel, performance-based mentality. When we see all across the Gospels, though, Jesus saying it's not the healthy who need the doctor, but the sick. Right? The people that are invited to the banquet are not the royalty, but the refuse. Right? Not the nobility, but the pimps and the hoes. They're the guys that are brought in. This is why there's a deep inadequacy when they fail. Right? They can't believe the gospel. I can't believe that God doesn't see my failures, that God doesn't see my sin, that he sees the perfection of Christ. I can't believe the gospel. But the flip side of that is there's superiority when they succeed. And I think this is even worse. They don't want to believe the gospel. Sure, God accepts me not based on my performance, but on the perfection of Jesus. But I don't need that because I've got something of my own. Superiority when they succeed. The offer of grace, right, being an offense to them. I'm sure I've shared this with you guys before, right? But you heard right before Dr. Lim left, right, and he gave everybody A's in his class, right? And there were actually students who got upset. They were like, oh, how could you do that? That's so not fair, right? I studied 16 hours and I get the same grade as a kid who just walks in late, right? And that's their attitude towards the gospel. They hear the offer of free grace and they're a little bit agitated, a little bit offended. Don't insult me with that. What about relationship-driven reality? How does that surface? What does that look like when the rubber hits the road? And very insightfully, it looks like relationality, right? This is why students are constantly annoying you. They call you on the cell phone. Like, I think Sage and Brian had a kid who called them like 3 times a day. I had a kid who called me at least every day. Just, hey, what's up? What are you doing? I'm like, what do you mean, what am I doing? I'm studying. Oh, okay. Is there something you need? No, I just want to hang on the phone. Right? I gotta go, dude. All right. Right? This is why they're IMing you, right? Constantly. If IM is still, I don't know, sexy here, right? The Facebook messaging you like literally 45 times a day, right? They want relationship. There was a kid at Arise, right? When the retreat was over, or actually every time I signed on to AIM, I'd literally see his screen name as soon as I signed on. 1 second later, hey, what's up? What's going on? Right? And then this is back when Zango was sexy, right? I would put up a Zango post, and literally within seconds, there'd be a comment. And every single time it'd be him. Like, oh my God. And then I'd see him in person, and he'd, hey man, right? He'd run off into the corner, right? This is why they do things like this. They're not just, well, some of them are just weird. Right? They're not just weird. They really they seek relationship from us. And I think through this relationship, they're looking for 2 things. They're seeking grace and they're seeking truth. Right? They want a relationship that's not asking them to perform, but that'll accept them. And just kind of as a side note, pastoral side note here, I'm actually going to say it's really important that we hang out with the kids that nobody hangs out with. Right? The kids that nobody accepts even when they're doing well. Right? You know who I'm talking about. Right? They're the kids that need relationship, that need us even more. But not only are they looking for grace, they're also looking for truth. I think it's absolutely false when people say kids don't care about truth. It's false. Right? They do. But the thing is, with our students, what helps them determine what is true is not what is most rational, not as what's most plausible, not as what's most practical. Not that I'm saying any of those, are the best. But the way they define their truth is through relationships. Right? And they're seeking a relationship that'll help them define what is true. And that's what they're seeking for in a relationship. They want acceptance, not based on their performance, but also a relationship that will bring them beyond simply hanging out, but to help them to define and create and to devise something that is true. So if that's the symptom, what's the cure? Here's the cure for the performance-driven mentality. Again, do you see the irony here? Right? That how we normally do ministry just spirals the problem. Right? We're using legalism to combat legalism. Right? It doesn't work. So what do? Again, tell them their story and tell them God's story. First, tell them their story. Right? And I didn't mention this before, but I'll mention it now. When you start telling them their story, they're immediately going to connect with you. Right. In fact, I think a lot of youth pastors have asked me, how do you connect with kids? How do you connect with kids in your preaching? How do you connect with kids when you counsel them or when you hang out with them? How do you get them to listen to you? I think when you start to tell them their story, they're like, wait, this is exactly my experience. Maybe I need to listen to what he has to say. Okay? So tell them their story. Show them that every relationship that they know deals with them based on performance and is killing them. Right? Some students will connect right away because they feel insecure, they feel guilty, they don't measure up, and they'll connect with you right away. But you know what? Even those that don't measure up, or that do measure up, after a while they will connect with you. Why? Right? For them, even when they measure up, there's still a nagging sense, a nagging fear. What if I'm not doing enough? What if I haven't quite measured up? And besides that, you know what? It's only fun being self-righteous for so long. And then it begins to eat away at you. I think when you begin to show them their story, you'll immediately connect with them. And then now the door is open now to tell them God's story. Right? That there is a relationship out there. Even better than me to you. I'm a human. I'm still going to deal with you that way sometimes. That doesn't deal with you based on your performance, but on that of another. Right? Inadequacy melts, so does superiority, and a drastic change in our kids. As I said before, we would talk about this a little later. Well, here it is. Right? That these students now are joyful and grateful, right? Not burdened and afraid. So now they actually start to do more and do better. I'm sure you've heard this illustration. It's probably been beat into the ground 80 billion times. But the illustration from American